What do you believe right now that's making you feel this way? And when you analyse it, you realise how irrational you can be at times.
Every single one of our major customers and minor customers all shut their doors overnight.
It's not sales per se, but the outcome of it is, because people get to know you, they get to see you.
But, you know, what's the culture like at the business? What do we stand for, the values?
I've got to tick that box on my personal development programme I don't really want to be here.
Scaling up a business isn't easy. If it were, we wouldn't have less than 4% of businesses scaling beyond 10 employees or around £1 million turnover level, and less than 1% beyond 50 employees. But the contribution that we make as owner-managers to our economies is immense and should never be underestimated. Yet it can be a tough gig for all of us at times, and only other business owners truly understand the challenges that we face. And through ScaleUp Radio, we aim to help make things a little easier. We interview guests who have been where you are now and may have faced some of the challenges that you are facing. And they offer their thoughts and advice on what has worked for them, as well as what didn't. And we've also combined many of the lessons from these interviews, and also through working with hundreds of owner managers over the last 10 years or so, into a practical scale-up handbook that we've called the Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System, or ESUS. And it's for owner managers like you and me as we navigate our own scale-up journey. And you can order a copy through your favourite online book retailer, or by going to all the W's, esusgroup.co.uk, www.esusgroup.co.uk. Another phenomenal discussion today on ScaleUp Radio. I talk with Jamie Farr, who is the co-founder with his wife Kelly of a business called Your North, and they're all around the aspects of mental health and well-being for individuals, but also within companies and other organizations. They work with the military, also work with what he terms the blue light organizations. We also explore the real power of core purpose and values and the strength of those within an organization. And we relate that back to some of Jamie's military experience in the RAF and his 13 tours or more that he's done. So he's been in high stress environments, understands what it takes then to really look after each other. And there's a lot of parallels, I think, a lot of lessons that we can learn from the way the military handle things and how we can bring that back to business. So I thoroughly recommend that you go across and listen to the rest of the story with Jamie. And you might like to take our little checklist around leveling up your strategy, and there's a number of things in there that might help you think about the core purpose, the core values, what we might term, what Jim Collins terms a core ideology, and level up your strategic thinking. Welcome to the latest episode of ScaleUp Radio. So I'm here today with Jamie Farr, who is the co-founder of Your North. So Jamie, welcome to ScaleUp Radio.
Oh, Kevin, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. So, Your North, what's that all about?
Great question. You've asked myself that so many times. I bet that's not the first time you've heard that either. So, Your North is essentially a mental health and wellbeing education company. We also offer coaching, but primarily we deliver one-day workshops, face-to-face, that focus on mental well-being, in particular taking ownership of mental well-being. We're a very preventative kind of organization in the sense that we know there is a mental health crisis. We know, that there are many people struggling, but we're more about not pulling people out of the river, but going upstream to find out where they're falling in.
Okay.
Trying to create a barrier there. And trying to lifeguard that situation, if that makes sense. And I think the best way to do that is through education. So there's kind of 5 areas that we focus on. The first being mental well-being. In particular, we talk about stress management. What is stress? Our relationship with it, our understanding of it, and what we can do to mitigate the impact of what we consider to be distressful situations. We talk about calming a busy mind. We try and break down or unpick what it means to be resilient and how that can become a learned behavior. About being present. When we talk about being present, we look at anxiety as being this kind of future-based problem, this uncertainty, the unknown, the what next.
Right.
And we consider, depression to be this reflective, past-based kind of understanding. So it's how we reflect in the past, reflect on our own decisions, the what ifs if we'd have done something differently, or there's a lot of negative self-talk in the mind as well. So we focus on that, and we find that being present, kind of mitigates that, that future or past-based kind of ideology that we can be faced with sometimes. And we focus on methods and tools essentially that people can use to be more present. And we find that, we've had a good impact with that. We talk about self-care, tribe management in particular. I love this, the quote that we become the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. So choose wisely.
Yeah.
So, we focus very much on people taking more control. I think that's the key word, isn't it? Control of who they spend time with and what they do. And the same can be said for technology, using the algorithms of social media to your advantage as opposed to letting them control you. It can often lead us down a dark path, that. So the other toolkits that we focus on then are your mindset toolkit. So we focus on motivation, goal setting. We talk about the unconscious mind and conscious mind as well, and forming habits, because I think that's particularly important. I want people to generate positive habits so that you become unconsciously competent.
Yeah.
It's like, you don't think about half the things you do with your hygiene routine in the morning, you just do it. And if we can generate healthy habits, in that perspective where they become automatic, I think people can live a life with more purpose. And I think the key word is satisfying. If they can have a life that's satisfying, people are genuinely happier.
Right.
We offer another toolkit called Your Communication Toolkit. I love this one in the sense that it's all about, why people do what they do. I talk about communication. I talk about rapport building, in particular questioning, the language that we use. Our internal dialogue is so powerful. We often wear labels and we don't realize we're wearing them. And we talk about unconscious bias, and the power of rapport is key. Often I say to people, do you have to like somebody to be in rapport? And, often the answer is yes. And that's not necessarily true. You have to think about that from a business perspective. You may often have to work with people that you don't like. So how can we break that kind of barrier of dislike and still build rapport in order to progress with whatever it is we're doing? I think your mindfulness toolkit is another great day. And the emphasis there is on being present. So we talk about what mindfulness is, where it came from. Yeah. I don't have a very woo background, if that makes sense. So
what's a woo background?
I guess a woo background would be, I do have a very open mind. I'm quite holistic in my approach to training and facilitation. But I wouldn't say that, I've ever done the flip-flops and chimes and gone down the Buddha route just yet. But I do like to introduce it in layman so people can make that choice for themselves. There is no closed doors when we talk about mindfulness. And I think when we talk about the history of it, what it is, you talk about John Kabat-Zinn, you talk about mindfulness-based stress reduction. We start talking about the theories that, came from the East to the West and how they evolved for us. I think that's really important. It gives people an idea of how it can benefit them, what the advantages are of it, and just that key to being present again in everyday life. I think we miss it.
Yeah.
I think we're often, it won't be wrong of me to say, because there's plenty of research out there, that anxiety is probably one of the biggest issues, especially since COVID, this future-based, unknown, uncertain, there's people that get comfortable not socializing. The isolation for a lot of people has been a comfort blanket, but it's also been a major problem for them. And when I think about anxiety and that future-based problem, I start to think about, wow, this affects everybody, not just those with mental illness or, a diagnosed mental health condition. This affects people on an everyday level. And I often think, especially from a business perspective, I could be stood there in the kitchen and be thinking about all of those things that I've got to do while I'm doing some chores around the house. Maybe a good example would be I'm washing the dishes. I'm thinking, I've got a report to write. I've got to prep for that lesson tomorrow. I have to think about impact reports, social media. Have I done any today? Have I kept on top of that? Am I interacting with people enough? And as I'm thinking about all of these things, my daughter pulls on my trouser leg and I go, what? Because my mind is full. I'm future-based. I'm thinking about all of these things at the same time. But, just a simplicity, or the simplicity of being present, i.e., I'm washing the dishes, so I'm focusing on that. I'm not thinking about future Jamie's problems.
So how do we do that? How do we stop our mind wandering to all of those other things you were talking about?
I think the key for me, and I can't speak for everybody, it's a very, what worked for me is something I talk about, and that is their future Jamie's problems, not now Jamie's problems. So it's, that allows me to park that for a moment. It may be just that I write them down. I generate a list, they're out of my mind, and I can focus on what I'm doing. But I think about every task that I do, even if it's just washing the dishes. I'll be there and I'll be thinking, oh, I've done a great job of that plate. Nice one, Jamie. Oh, look how clean that is. I'm making the house nice for my family, keeping the nest tidy. And then when my daughter pulls on my trouser leg, I go, what can I do for you, sweetheart? Because I'm present. I'm there. I'm in the moment. And there's no distraction. There's no future-based things to think about. And that's the beauty of being present. And that's something I think when we talk about it simply, and I think it was Einstein that said, if you can't explain something simply enough, then you don't understand it. Yeah. So keeping things simple for me, when I, facilitate discussion around the benefits of being present and being mindful, I think it generates that understanding that people think, well, I can do this in every aspect of my day. It's not just something that I have to formally do by setting aside time to do a mindful meditation or access something on an app where I've had a notification that says, Jamie, can you need to calm down, mate, because heart rate, you need to control your breathing. I think as we do that more, it becomes this unconscious habit that really does benefit us to the point where we don't even realize how good it is, and that's when we know that we've nailed it.
So do your clients tend to be individuals, or are they employees within businesses, and your clients the businesses themselves, or what will they be?
I'll have to take you back to the start there, Cohen, because everything kind of changed a little bit right from the beginning. We're quite rare in the sense, me and my wife, we founded Your North as soon as we left the military. So we've been planning this journey prior to leaving the military. We knew that we wanted to work for ourselves. I think it boils down to that, wanting our own freedom, being in control, being able to find that life in balance as opposed to putting work first. I think that's often, kind of an understanding that we have when we think work-life balance. Why does work come first? Our kind of mindset was, no, it's life in balance. Work is a part of it, but it's not a priority. We have to think about how we can merge all of that together, and how does that fall in line with our values. So that's why it took an interesting turn. So we thought initially very corporate. Right. We wanted to go down the wellbeing, the first aid for mental health route. We knew that there was a need for that. We've been delivering first aid for mental health for the military before we left. Okay. We kind of broke away from engineering for the last 6 years of our military career. And I was delivering with my wife while we were serving. We were facilitating professional development courses. And we were part of a team that created what's known as a human performance course. So it was a 5-day out of uniform, off station in a church building, where we could get people from all ranks. So you'd have a station commander and a brand new recruit all in the same room at the same time. And we'd spend 5 days basically just kind of facilitating discussion around everything that I spoke about with my toolkits. Right. We stress management, goal setting, internal dialogue, language. It was loosely based around neuro-linguistic programming. We kind of completed a few courses that way. The interesting thing is the Air Force wasn't a fan of hypnosis at the time, so we ditched that bit and we focused on all of the coaching attributes that NLP can give us, and we've thoroughly enjoyed that. That's where our passion kind of came from.
Right.
That's what sparked our desire and our curiosity and why people do what they do. The programs that we run, the patterns of behavior, and how we can actually be in more control of that than we think. So the passion came from there. We thought we could take this straight into corporate. We launched our business in March 2020, 2 weeks before the pandemic hit.
Brilliant. Great. There's nothing like
timing.
Yeah.
Perfect. So if you're going to start a face-to-face training company, do it at the point where you're no longer allowed to be in a classroom with people.
Yeah.
Outstanding. But, our company values are adaptability, integrity, and curiosity. So adaptability for us was, how do I take this training online? The need now seems greater than ever. So let's market that. Let's move forward. What we found really interesting, though, is the armed forces community, which includes veterans, would approach us more than the corporate based on our marketing. Our marketing was very personal. It was a personal approach. We were selling our kind of personal brand. It was all about Kelly and I moving forward, what we'd achieved so far, what we'd done in the military, and we really did focus on that. And that generated a lot of interest from the veteran community. So as apart from that, the limited company that we'd established before we left the Air Force never really got off the ground in the beginning. And what we found is that first year, we set up a community interest company to run alongside. And the community interest company then became Your North Veteran Support. That gave us an opportunity then to apply for funding, to create our toolkits, to really launch our business and sharpen our skill set with that veteran community that was very interested in what we were doing.
Right.
So, moving forward with that, I started to work with the blue light community as well. So the military kind of pulled me back a little. We did a lot of first aid for mental health training with the military. We did our wellbeing toolkits for the veteran community. We set up a veteran support hub. We co-run that with an armed forces liaison officer called Lisa Rawlins from Caerphilly. That hit off really well. And what we found was that working with that veteran community, or the armed forces community in general, really sat well with our values. And it was something that felt very natural.
Yeah.
So that was a great step for us, because not only could I sharpen our skills with delivery of toolkits, with the generation of content, with impact reporting, with discovering, what was the impact, how were people reacting, getting really good, authentic, and honest feedback on what we were doing so we could adapt it. It was just a great way for us to start without going straight into the corporate and maybe not getting that authentic response or those difficult potential interactions with HR that we're literally looking for tick box exercises when it comes to mental health training for the organizations. I'm generalizing a little bit there. Not everybody's like that. But some of those initial kind of contacts did have that feel about it. But it just felt like a really authentic, genuine start that allowed us to develop our skills and move forward. So those two companies running alongside one another were great. I could still do a lot of work with the limited company and the corporate arena. So, we kind of started to network and develop relationships, around the South Wales area. But the CIC took a lot of our attention, and that's kind of how we networked, how we collaborated with other businesses. Yeah. And that opened a lot of doors for the corporate side with regards to us stepping into the education sector, for example, where we knew the content that we had would fit that kind of demographic beautifully, because there was a huge hole there. I've looked back over some of your talks, and one of the common themes is that people are going into the education arena because, mental health and well-being is something that doesn't currently reside in any syllabus. It's not there, so that we need something for that. And that became evident when I volunteered to be governor for Colleague Gwent, so I could sit on the board and see how, mental health and wellbeing was being incorporated in, on a much larger scale in the education sector. So there's a lot of things to learn from that. But yeah, I could see these gaps forming.
Yeah. Okay. And what sort of things as business owners, maybe and our audience trying to scale their businesses, what sort of things do we need to be thinking about with regards to mental health?
It's an interesting thing. There's a lot going on in the mental health arena. It's a very busy kind of sector. And what I've found, especially working within education, and I don't mean from my governor's perspective, that's a completely separate thing, but I have been working with companies that, we've collaborated with companies that have invited me to go to colleges or into kind of learning environments for those that haven't made it through college or school, have had troubled backgrounds, etc. I've gone in to deliver our toolkits. And I'll be honest with you, what I've noticed is that they use multiple platforms, multiple organizations that seem to do the same thing.
Right.
So it can be difficult for some of the people within those organizations to figure out which thing they need to be doing. So it's almost like there is too much.
Yeah.
And people feel like the choice can actually increase someone's anxiety, in the point of there's so much for me to look at that I'm not really sure what to do. There's so many kind of platforms out there. I'm not going to mention any because I don't. But I know certain colleges, especially in the South Wales areas, they may have 3 or 4 cloud-based platforms that they use to offer help and advice regarding mental health for the students and staff. So it can be confusing, and I think the message can be somewhat diluted. And like I said to you earlier, it's very kind of it can be very reactive as well, in the sense that I don't feel like there's an education piece there for somebody that that hasn't yet got an issue. It's like you have to have an issue to then seek support, as opposed to, why aren't we educating people early doors to prevent this kind of mindset forming in the first place? It's almost like a lot of these kind of approaches are reactive, as opposed to being preventative. And I find that even me within this sector, if I type in mental health and I look at what's local, I can be overwhelmed with the amount of hits. What's the right support for me? And I think a more human, interactive, facilitative approach, I found has been key. And
I guess that's that's sort of criticism has been levelled at the NHS as well, just for general care, doesn't it? General health care, because again, it's very reactive, and when we've got symptoms, we get treated. But actually, it's the preventative side that is probably what would stop a lot of that in the first place. As you say, you said right at the beginning, you try and swim upstream a little bit and stop somebody falling in, rather than hoiking them out when they're already halfway down the stream. What if we think about business owners, and we're really busy trying to get our businesses to work, and there's not enough hours in the day for a lot of us, and all of that, and we might have stress with our people going on. How do we what do we need to think about to make sure that we are doing some of those good things you're talking about, and making sure we don't end up with a problem down the line?
It's an interesting one. I talk myself out of some of the things that I offer. This can be terrible sometimes. The first aid for mental health course is a great example, because it is designed to be reactive. Somebody comes to you with a problem, and you can then effectively signpost. You can listen, you can hold a conversation, you can start a difficult conversation. It becomes, a proactive / kind of reactive approach. It's very necessary. It's relevant. I am aware that I think they're looking at making it law that first aid for mental health is introduced into the workplace through the first aid health needs assessment. So the more I think about that, the more I realize it's relative. The biggest thing for me is culture.
Right.
In the sense that, you know, you do have a lot of people working from home. You do have a lot of people that may be working flexibly. So they're in work, they're out of work, they're in home. I just feel sometimes that it boils down to leadership, to understanding people, you know, and this is one of the biggest things that I found in the military. You know, when I said I was leaving, I remember my boss saying, "No, that's fine. We can find somebody else." And I thought, you know, if I, you know, that's 25-year career. If I wasn't resilient and thick-skinned, that may have impacted me negatively. And that may have been a mindset that I'd have left the military with going forward that would have impacted on all of my decisions.
Right.
Self-doubt, insecurities. You know, I mustn't have been that good if nobody cared about me leaving. You know, so it's an interesting point when I think about how do you communicate with your staff? You know, how is that communication based? And this is why, you know, the communication toolkit that I talk about, the building rapport with people, the understanding language, realizing the impact of what you say, and also taking responsibility for the things that you say. I think that's half the thing is responsibility. You know, we can often go down a path where, you know, there's a, you know, when I think about communication in one respect, there's a communication is the, you know, the meaning of communication is the response you get.
Okay.
You know, and if you're not communicating effectively, you can sometimes blame the person for their response and not revisit what it is you said in order to try and glean a better response.
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely a culture of misunderstanding. And I think the use of technology can be problematic. I don't think people fully, you know, they can kind of be misunderstood, misrepresented through the communication of, you know, and the use of technology when they're communicating things. It can be very abrupt, impersonal, you know, and that, if you're working at home and you get a very formal email, look at how that can, you know, what's wrong with a phone call and discussing something through so there's less ambiguity. You know, making emails more personal. I'm not saying cover everything in flowers and smiley faces. My point is that I don't think often that we communicate with purpose. And I don't think we always check understanding.
Right.
You know, I think back to being in the military and how autocratic some leaders were and how, you know, impersonal or insensitive some people could be. But, you know, I liken it back to yourself. You think about your time in the military, your favorite leaders were the ones that could communicate across all ranks.
Yep.
Those that could relate to any rank and any circumstance. So, absolutely. You know, 13 tours of Afghan, I got to understand how my communication.
How many tours of Afghan?
13.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, no, that's 12. And then I did, you know, it was about 12. Yeah. And then I did 3 in Iraq as well.
Wow.
So, yeah, I got to see how, you know, the impact of my communication impacted on other people and how I'd often make assumptions and how when I reflect, you know, as a team leader in some respects, when I was thinking back to how I would talk to people who had families, I spent a lot of those tours. I didn't have children.
Right.
So I couldn't relate to their kind of anxieties about being away.
Yeah.
And maybe the responsibilities that they had and how they, you know, compose themselves on ops. I just thought the only person I'm responsible for is me. And that could make me a kind of insensitive leader. It could make me, or, you know, that autocratic approach. It's always formal. I know there's a time and a place for that in the military, but I do think there's that need for flexibility and understanding.
So you know, you've seen some incredibly high stress environments, I would imagine, and possibly to a certain extent must make you think about, you know, what you know, with a business owner, you know, what are they worried about really compared to a situation in Afghan? So what sort of lessons have you been able to bring from those high stress environments, do you think, into what you do now?
Oh, great question. Do you know what? I'm studying a degree at the moment in psychology, and part of my research is understanding the transition from military, so the psychological impact of transition for those leaving the military.
Right.
And a common theme is a lack of control or lack of purpose.
Okay.
And one of the things that I found from the military is I thrived on purpose. I worked in a team that had common goals.
Yeah.
We had common values. Integrity was almost a given with 99% of the people that you work with. Authenticity was key. And people were very adaptable. And there was, there wasn't any complacency.
Yeah.
That makes a perfect team.
Yeah. And you don't go, that's not my job, do you?
No. Everyone mucks in, regardless, without question. And that is a beautiful thing to witness. Right. And I was fortunate enough, and something has to come out of conflict that's positive. And for me, it was seeing just how capable people are when they work together with all of those things combined.
Yeah.
And I think the frustration for a lot of people when they leave the military is not finding that. Is not being able to communicate with the civilian counterparts when they move to an organization, because there's so many differences. Values might be different. It might be that military people, value security over money, but money is necessary for security, but the actual drive for that money, if they're secure at home, there's no drive for finance. Anybody that you speak to in the military, if they did it for the money, they're in the wrong job.
Yeah.
When you think about some of the things they had to do. Yeah. My point, I guess, is that, having that purpose, having that kind of team, that work ethic, if that's not represented within the team that you go to when you work in Civilian Street, that can be really damaging to their mental health, because they're like, I don't fit in. I don't belong. This team isn't reflective of me, and the pace of work and work ethic is so different that it can be frustrating. I remember leaving, Odium, going into a 9-to-5 teaching job, and I almost cried every day, because I'd gone from high intensity, straight from Afghanistan, straight to COSFID in a 9-to-5, working alongside civilians that were used to this pattern of work, and I literally didn't know what to do. I thought I wanted to do work all of the time, and I was almost being told, slow down, you're making us look bad, or don't do this. And it got to that point where I just felt, deflated. All right. So I liken that to one of the reasons why I chose self-employment was because I felt that I had control and purpose. This was my ambition. It wasn't somebody else's ambition or inspiration. It wasn't someone else's goal. It was mine. Yeah. And I was fortunate enough to with my wife, who had exactly the same thought process. She was the co-founder. She taught with me. We did everything alongside. She fills in the gaps that I've got when it comes to marketing, social media. We make a perfect team in that sense. And I think that having that purpose, having that goal was absolute key for me. Yeah.
And
sorry, go on.
I was going to say, and that I'm assuming, I shouldn't assume, but I'm assuming that the reason you called it your North is to do with the North Star type.
It's about direction. I remember us sat there thinking, we love neurolinguistic programming. That was our kind of start into coaching and trying to figure out why people do what they do. As we moved forward with that kind of mindset, we started to explore different things, different avenues, different kind of mindsets, different theories. We were curious. I felt like a child again. It was great. Yeah. I could leave engineering behind and I could focus on something new that actually filled me with joy. And it was great. And both of us moving forward with that, we thought, look at, it's not about us. It's about the people sat in front of us. Now, there's so many egos when it comes to facilitation or talking or motivational speakers, and there's a lot of that. And there's some great inspiring stories. But I just found, God, the facilitation piece for us is what's exciting, because I can throw a seed in the room and watch everyone else jump on it. And the communication, the way they talk about it and share experiences, if I can facilitate that, that's where the learning, that's where the magic is.
Yeah.
So it's not about my direction. It's not about our north. It's about your north. And
Yes.
that's where we just sat, and that's where the name came from.
Which I think is great, and I love the way you put that from your experience within the military, and I've seen that too. I've seen it also in businesses, and often when the chips are down and when we've all got to muck together, we do, and that's as you say, that's when you realise how great people are. How great we can be, the capacity for doing good and really working together. It's when we lose that direction and that purpose, isn't it, that then we start to have the troubles, and we get that little bit of backbiting and politics and all those sort of things. So what lesson can we take if we're a business owner trying to build a great business where all our people are working well together, and we're avoiding, we're preempting them falling into that river. How do we build that culture within a business and maintain it as we grow?
I think the way you go about that is very dependent on the size of the organization.
Right.
And I think if the larger the organization, the more you need those in the middle to understand the reasons why that organization started. I mean, for us, we're just a husband and wife organization. We haven't employed anybody. We're very keen at this point to do that. That is our goal from us. But whenever things get tough, we go back to the reasons why we started.
Yeah.
And for me, company values are the key. It doesn't matter how big you are when it comes to those values. If everybody understands them, just like in the military, we have those shared values, that shared purpose. If everybody understands that kind of that ideology or that mindset, it kind of looks after itself. But it's just reminding people why. For so many people, working in an organization can be just a job. It can be just, I'm just paying the bills, I'm just getting by. That's not a mindset that's going to get somebody to do that thing that you want them to do when no one's watching.
Yeah.
That's where the integrity thing comes in. It's where people will do that little bit more because they share that common understanding, that common goal. And they understand the reason why you start. And that's what I think one of the biggest issues, isn't it, for any business owner, is we have this passion, and then when we bring other people on and it's not shared, that's where the conflict begins.
Yeah, exactly. And I know it's a really difficult question, because if the answer was a really simple answer, we wouldn't have this trouble. But how do we do that? How do we get other people to share our vision so that it becomes theirs and not just ours?
I think you have to constantly talk about it. It can't be something you do every, at monthly or biannual meetings.
Yeah.
It can't be something you do. We'll have a conference and remind everybody why we started. I think it has to be a common conversation that happens regular, that is constantly revisited. Even if it's just, having things up on the wall to remind you. As you walk into a meeting room, there's affirmations on the wall that relate to company values.
Yeah.
It's a message that you constantly distribute. It's there on the emails. It's something that everybody can relate to, and it's something that you can discover during that employment process as well. When you're interviewing people, that can be the message, and you almost know at that point if somebody's buying into that or not. And that's where you have to make that decision, I think. Is this person does this person understand my values? Do they understand the message and what it is we're trying to achieve? And I think that becomes diluted when the focus is on money. And essentially that's why a lot of people are in business, isn't it? Because they want to make money. It's all about the shareholders. We have this drive, but sometimes the message gets lost in that. And that's when communication, I think, becomes... all conflict kind of begins. Yeah, when we don't have that same shared message.
Yeah, good. And do you think there's anything else we can learn from the military about team sizes? Because the military is very good at structuring into small structured units. So yes, we might have a huge battalion or whatever, or wing, but actually it's broken down into smaller units, isn't it? Well,
I think. On reflection, when I think back to that, I think the integration of the units was key. It's when you separate them that things become problematic. A great example of that would be engineering and logistics.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm out of Afghanistan. I'm trying to fix this helicopter, but I don't have engineering supply team embedded within my team. They're a separate organization, and they're now pooled on the unit, say Camp Bastion. They're now pooled, and they're there to supply everybody.
Mm.
Now, efficiently, that might look great on paper. It might look like they're saving money, but they're not. They don't have my organization's interest at heart. They have the big picture at heart, at which point they don't communicate with me properly. They don't understand what I need. Mm-hmm. When I've gone away before, and like Iraq was a great example of that, we'd have our own suppliers integrate. They were part of the team. So they understood the urgency of what it is we were trying to achieve.
Yeah.
So their message was, we need these parts now in order to keep this aircraft, not you'll have to wait for a minute because we're dealing with that. And it just felt like there was constant conflict when that changed.
Yeah,
and
when it was separated,
Yeah, and even when, we had, and we even separated weapons engineers from mechanical engineers, and they became a pool of their own where they would work everywhere else. Mm. And we almost felt like we didn't know them.
Yeah.
That we were asking for a favor. Yeah. And I think that kind of favor mindset can happen when we break apart.
Yeah, and you're referring to is often referred to as silos, isn't it? We create these silos that are completely separate and contained, and no cross communication apart from at some very high level up the top, where it loses its meaning for the individuals within it. Yeah, really really interesting. So trying to break those silos. There's also a really strong sort of buddy system within the military, isn't there? As I've got your back, you've got my back, sort of thing. Are there things we can learn from that, do you think, in business?
Yeah, 100%. I think it boils down to integrity again, doesn't it? Doing the right thing when no one's looking.
Yeah. And
I think that was kind of the embedded message that everybody got through basic training. You think back to basics. What did they do? You made a bed, everything. Everybody was punished when one person made a mistake. Whether or not you think that's right, there were some really good values that were created from that.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's, again, if you're an organization where you highlight the inadequacies of one individual, you alienate that person. But when you say, why weren't you helping that individual to do a better job? All of a sudden, everyone feels the responsibility there. And again, this may lead back to leadership and the kind of management. But I think when everybody's accountable, which is very much the method of the military, everybody seems to pull together then. So we fill in gaps for each other. If somebody's not as good at a certain job than anyone else, we help bring them back so we can try and keep people at the same level. And I think that's something that, as a business going forward, I almost feel like initially, I feel like I'll probably employ veterans because of that. I'm not saying I'll never employ anybody else, because that would be wrong. I'm just saying that initially, I think from my own kind of perspective, that I can almost lean on them a little bit. But don't get me wrong, there's still, just because someone's a veteran doesn't mean they're a good person. I've met a few that aren't over the years, but I think inherently there's an unspoken rule that I know that you'll have my back.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting concept. I think it's something, doesn't matter how long you've served, really. I think that's something that can be embedded, through that initial basic training.
Yeah.
And you can learn a lot as a bit from business with that as well.
I think that's right. And one of the, we've got to be a bit careful here, because people start thinking we're advocating a return of national service or something. but one of the things that the military is very good at, right at the beginning, you mentioned one of the what you were doing with your courses in the last five years in the RAF, where you were mixing, you had the station commander in with a new recruit, and they're not in uniform, so you're deliberately trying to strip away the perception that somebody's more senior, and they do that at basic training, don't they? They take everybody the first few weeks, they make it really tough for everybody, and you strip away all of those class differences, backgrounds, all of those things, and you're all working together then to overcome some of these challenges. And yes, they some of them may look petty, and yes, as you say, there's a bit of dust, or your bed pack's not made properly, or whatever, or whatever. They may be petty, but as you say, they take you all to the same level, get you working to help each other, and then build you up again, don't they? But I guess we can't really do that quite in our businesses. We can't really quite be that tough on people, but we can think about how we can really start to really try and look after each other, get each other's backs, help each other out, not just work in silos, like we were saying, and go, yeah, that's my job, that's not my job, look after yourself sort of thing. But actually, how can we help? Yeah, really good. Yeah.
There's a definite place for hierarchy. Don't get me wrong. It's important. It's necessary. It's how things keep moving. But I think, every level should explore bigger picture, understanding. And I think a collaborative approach, as opposed to a competitive one, creates relationships and bonds within the workplace where, this like equality and understanding and like you said, having each other's back seems to form part of that culture then. I think it's all about common goal, isn't it? When you have that common goal, as opposed to being competitive where I'm better than you, it just causes conflict. Yeah,
exactly. No, really, really good. So what are some of the things that have surprised you about since you set up the business? Obviously, you set it up, as you said, just before lockdown. But what have you learned? What have you got right? What have you got wrong? Do you think over the few years that you've run the business?
I think we jumped the gun a little bit when we thought about collaborating with people. I didn't. I don't mean to keep referring to the military, but that's all I've done since I was 17. Yeah. So it was a big step for me to come from the military into the business world. Yeah. There was a lot for me to learn. I think the mindset I had and the work ethic I had from the military kind of pushed me to think, it's okay, I can learn how to do that and I'll give it a go. And right from the get-go, I would be sorting my own website out. I'd be looking into social media, marketing strategies, how to communicate, who's my audience, look at my competition. I did all of the things that you should be expected to do as a startup so you can have the best start. I think I spent too much time learning when potentially if I'd have thought about finance first, I could have financed and outsourced a lot of those things so I could have focused on what it is I wanted to do. Yeah. There's another side to that coin though, in that through that journey, I've learned a lot. Mm-hmm. I've learned a lot about how to do things right, what works. So it's almost like I can be a lot more selective with my outsourcing, so I don't actually waste a lot of money in the beginning. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in there. Yeah. In the sense that I've learned enough to know what to outsource and what is viable and effective. But at the same time, I know I spent a large amount of time in that area. I was lucky though. I wouldn't say lucky. No, it was planned. I had a gratuity when I left the Air Force. Mm-hmm. I left that in the bank. I didn't see COVID coming, so I trickle fed that as though I was getting a wage every month. Right. And I felt like I was in control at that point. I didn't envisage it going on for as long as it did. So that ran out quite quickly. Right. But had I not had that, things would have been very different. I would have had a constant internal battle with self-employment, employment. Where do I go? Yeah. Because there's that kind of urge to want to support my family, but at the same time, don't want to give up on this dream. Yeah. It's tough.
So on that dream, where do you, if we're having this conversation in 5 years' time, what does success look like for you?
Well, I think success for Your North Veteran Support from the CIC, which is obviously a social enterprise. For me, what I'd like to do is use that education piece to provide a peer mentor scheme for all of the veteran blue light charities and big organizations. So they're all kind of working in the same direction. I think one of the biggest problems is there's so many organizations out there offering support, but yet it's so different. And I think if from a peer mentor perspective, if everybody had a certain level of training, I think they'd all be a lot more effective right from the start. And I think that's been an issue for a lot. From the corporate side, wow, I'd love to employ a bunch of facilitators. I'd like to go out on the road. I'd take this on an international level. I'd very much like to go to America as well and see what's over there. But yeah, I can, in 5 years' time, I envisage, employing a good, 10 facilitators that we can go cross country, delivering our face-to-face training. I love technology, don't get me wrong, but I'm all about body language. I'm all about facial expressions. I'm all about checking understanding, and facilitating discussion. I find that it's not difficult online. I've learned to do a much better job of that. Initially, it was everyone's cameras were off, COVID, don't want to be seen. It was difficult for me. I felt like I was talking to myself often, and often then when we get to the one-to-ones, when we're doing assessments, say for First Aid for Mental Health, everybody shows me that they were engaged the entire time. It was great. And it was like, spent this whole time wondering.
Yeah. You start to get a bit of a feeling what it must be like to be a radio presenter, don't you?
I couldn't do it.
No, I couldn't.
I need that feedback.
Yeah.
So I'm going to push for that human interaction, that experience. That is going to be a focus of ours to get into organizations and really change that culture from within. I think that could be, that could easily be tied in with the use of technology. How I go about that? It's an interesting thought. I've listened to a couple of your previous podcasts, and I've listened to we've looked at technology such as heart math and things like that have ear sensors, and you can attach to an app so people can monitor their stress levels, and I can see patterns within their working weeks or month whereby I can say, look, have you noticed that you always tense on a Friday when you have that finance meeting with Mark, but you almost look like you're the happiest on Tuesday. Why don't you have that finance meeting on a Tuesday? Because you might get some better results. We can have conversations like that and embed technology within it. I don't know. I'm trying my best to see how that works. That's difficult for me because I'm a people person.
Yeah. So what are your goals for this year, do you think?
This year?
Yeah.
Kelly, my wife, co-founder, she's fantastic at social media. I really need to up my game. My interaction hasn't been as good as it should be. I know what needs to be done. I've just not done it.
Yeah.
And I've found that, a lot of what I've been focusing on is educating myself, getting my psychology degree, understanding, the armed forces and veteran community. That's taken a lot of my attention from the things that I know are fundamental to my business. The beauty of what I'm doing currently is it allows me to articulate my business better. So I'm going to be in a better place to do that. I just know that this next year, we're currently having rebranding. We've collaborated with a few organizations. We're moving into different areas. So the armed forces community has branched now into blue light. Yeah. We've got a lot of foots in doors with regards to the education sector. So I'm excited about this year.
And you're winning awards as well, aren't you?
Yeah, we won a few. Yeah. It's been great, though, because the networking from that has been fantastic. We met some great people. Yeah. So we've been very fortunate for that. Okay. We won Veterans Entrepreneur of the Year, Business Startup of the Year with a Welsh veteran startup. We won Startup Awards National Series.
Wow.
God,
phenomenal.
That's the South Wales business. We won Business of the Year, Business Service Provider of the Year. That was great.
Yeah.
At Cardiff. So it's been exciting. There's a lot of awards there. It's been great for us to get out there and meet people and talk to other businesses. And I think having a mindset of collaboration over competition has been a key factor for us.
Yeah.
You know, we've kind of identified those that are pure competition focused, that have been that have potentially created barriers between our community, you know, the way we communicate with each other.
Yeah.
And I found that tribe management, it's not just about the personal life. We have to consider who I'm kind of dealing with. An example would be the amount of work I've turned down because that organization I don't share values with.
Right.
Is interesting. I didn't see that happening. I thought I'd just get stuck in. But it's work, Jamie. But there was just something about, certain organizations that wanted to hire me so they could tick a box. I thought, you've got no interest in culture change.
Yeah.
You just want to tick a box to say that you've done something for your staff. And when I sense that, when my intuition kicks in, I get this gut instinct that you're not really interested in me being there. This is just a process for you.
Yeah.
I find that I can't work with that.
Well,
even though I know that a lot of the employees need that, I know unless that comes from there, from above, it's not gonna trickle down. Like the amount of times I've said, if your boss isn't coming on the course, I'm not doing it. And they're like, what? I say, well, what's the point in you having first aid for mental health trained people if your boss doesn't even know what the process or understanding is?
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, fair one.
Yeah, it's
Most
great.
of them have said, the boss is coming in, so this is great.
It's great that you've got that strength to be able to do that from early on, because it's often a hard lesson that we learn later on in business when we've had a few bad experiences of wondering why on earth that project or that piece of work or whatever went belly up, and we realize, but having that north star as you've got, and the values, and then that enables you to then go, actually, you know what, this isn't a fit for us, and probably be able to foresee that therefore it's not going to work. Brilliant, good. Well, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I've indulged myself and really enjoyed some of the conversations we've had. Quick fire, a couple of questions, if I may.
Go for it.
So, if you were to go back to your younger self, what advice would you give yourself?
Wow, good question. Take more risks.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, take more risks. I think back to, I don't have this huge kind of value that's money. And if I'd just go back to my younger self, I'd have probably taken more risks. I'd have probably bought a house younger. I'd have done this, I'd have done that. I wouldn't have, I'd have take more risks. Go for it.
Good. Any resources, whether they be books, podcasts, or things that have really helped you?
Oh, loads, so many. There's a great book that often I'll visit when I need to kind of give my perspective a bit of defib. And that's a book called Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Okay, yeah. Great book. It really does put me back into that, right? Yeah. Take your victim T-shirt off, Jamie. Take responsibility for who you are. You've got this, mate. Let's go. Yeah. I'm kind of looking towards now, often I used to think very much in my head. I'm very much now about the whole self. There's 37 trillion cells in our body, and every single one is eavesdropping on our internal dialogue. So we've got to be careful what we say to ourselves. And I often realize that whatever's going on in here is impacting on my physiology. So come on. A great book for that was Dr. Bruce Lipton, Biology of Belief. Talks about the environment and how it impacts on you at a cellular level. And I thought, wow. All right. That's not one I'm familiar with. Right. I'll look that up. Yeah. It's a great book. Excellent. Good. You mentioned technology. Yeah. Are there any particular apps that you find really useful that you would recommend? Yeah, I love free stuff. Yeah, so I'm a sucker for free stuff. Interestingly, the NHS developed an app called Companion Stress and Anxiety.
Okay.
It was developed, I believe, for the staff originally during COVID.
Right.
So it's full of stress management techniques, breathing techniques, and so, affirmations, how to be more mindful in the present moment. There's so many great resources on there, and majority, it's all free. There is paid versions to it, but you don't need them. It's got enough on there. Okay. And it's called Companion Stress and Anxiety. I spoke to, I've had NHS staff on my courses. They didn't even know it existed. Yeah. I was like, wow. But I've got that on my phone. It's brilliant. It's got breathing techniques, very simple things. It's got to take you back to basics. You don't have to always hand your soul over to a white coat. There's things you can do for you, like regularly, daily. Yeah. And if we can get into those habits, that, having those apps at hand just to give you that structure in the beginning so that these really positive habits become unconsciously competent at. Yeah. So you just naturally do it. I'm all for that. Yeah. So if you search NHS though, I don't think it comes up. I think you just put companion stress anxiety. Okay. And the app will come up.
Brilliant. Very good.
Yeah, that's very useful.
We'll put that in the show notes. Thank you. Who's had the most influence on you, do you think, maybe as a business leader or just for yourself?
As a business leader, good one. My wife, without doubt. Yeah. If she shared the goal with me right from the beginning, we would converse with each other about why we were doing it. Yeah. And we focused on the why so much that everything just fell into place from there. Yeah. Brilliant. We revisited that. She has so many skills that I don't. And I think that's what makes us such a good team.
Fantastic.
We learn from each other that way.
Great. And what's your most successful tactic for finding new customers?
A personal brand. I have to consider about what it is we're doing. We're all about human interaction, communication, understanding each other. So for me, the personal brand was key. From that generated word of mouth, getting people on the courses, Google reviews, people talking about us as people, not as an organization. Actually emphasize the brand as opposed to us just pushing a brand. Yeah. We became Your North without trying. It was literally from us. I think it's in such a good place now that Your North itself, it has become its own thing, but it's only become its own thing based on the message that Kelly and I have pushed out personally.
Yeah, your story.
Yeah, we've pushed a story, we've pushed a narrative that is very personal. Mm. A lot of people say don't do that, but for us, it's worked.
Excellent.
And it's enabled those connections. So, yeah.
Really good. Well, lots of fantastic advice and real life experience in there. Thank you very much indeed for that, Jamie. If people would like to get hold of your Kelly or find out more about Your North, what's the best way for them to do that?
If they were to type Your North UK in any of the socials, you'll find us. Obviously, Jamie Farr or Your North, both on LinkedIn. Website yournorth.co.uk. There's plenty of information on there, so you can find out what it is we do, where we do it, and how to contact us that way. So there's lots out there.
Good, but we'll put those in the show notes. That's fantastic. So, Jamie Farr, thank you very much indeed for being my guest on ScaleUp Radio today.
Kevin, it's been an honour. Thank you, mate.
I hope you enjoyed that discussion, and if you're building and scaling your own business, you might well be interested in our book, The Entrepreneurial Scale-Up System. And it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a practical handbook around scaling a business in a structured way. And you can order a copy on all your favorite online retailers, including an audio version, or you can find it and other supporting resources on our website, www.esusgroup.co.uk. That's esusgroup.co.uk, which is esusgroup.co.uk.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.